1775.
Abolitionist.
Society. In 1775, Anthony Benzett from Philadelphia founded the first ever
Abolitionist.
society in the world. And not much longer, in 1876, Benjamin Franklin became its president. The people in the Underground Railroad were
Abolitionist.
1793 Fugitive Slave Act. In 1793, Fugitive Slave Act was a law they put in place where that if anyone who owned slaves and had a slave escape, they were allowed to try and capture the slave and bring and prove to the government that they owned that slave. And then the slave had to return to their owner's property. Some people did not like this because people who tried to help slaves were fined, and this also basically made kidnapping legalized. Some of these slaves were able to escape, and they used the Underground Railroad to find freedom. 1808, United States banned slave trade. In 1808, the United States banned the slave trade, which made it illegal to import African slaves. But lots of people did not follow the law and smuggled in and traded the slaves anyway. Some of these slaves traveled on the Underground Railroad. 1837, Anti-Slavery Convention. In 1837, the first of the Anti-Slavery Convention was held in New York by the Anti-Slavery Society of American Women. This event was attended by both white and black women. In other states, including Pennsylvania and Mississippi, blacks had lost the right to vote, but they still petitioned in New York. This is also significant to the Underground Railroad because slaves were transported to freedom on this railroad. 1849, Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman was a female black slave who escaped from slavery in Maryland and traveled to Canada. When Harriet escaped, she became a conductor on the Underground Railroad, and she led enslaved people to freedom. She had a very big bounty on her head because of this, but she traveled 90 miles north on the railroad to Pennsylvania and escaped to freedom. 1850, Compromise of 1850. The Compromise of 1850 was a series of bills passed to try to fix the problems of slavery. And there was a rule put in place where the people of America were able to vote if a new state had a slave trade or not. And this caused lots of states to become free states. This compromise and the Fugitive Slave Act made a
Abolitionist.
more motivated to end slavery, and around 1850 to 1860 were the peak years for freeing slaves. 1854, Kansas-Nebraska Act. The Kansas-Nebraska Act was an act to try and organize Kansas and Nebraska. A politician at the time known as Douglas was working on this act and needed pro-slavery votes. But what he did was say people who lived in this territory could decide if they wanted to have slavery there or not. This act was later passed. Nebraska was a free state and Kansas was a pro-slavery state. But what happened was the pro-slavery people and the anti-slavery people got into fights to try and get their way. At the time, they wanted to also build a transcontinental railroad, but these problems prevented the railroad. 1865, 13th Amendment. The 13th Amendment was an amendment that the United States put into place in 1865, where slavery was planned to be completely eradicated, and it became illegal to own slaves, where if anyone tried to own slaves, they would be punished by law. At the time, the President of the United States was Abraham Lincoln, and he passed the 13th Amendment. After this was passed, slaves were no longer freed by the Underground Railroad, and they were able to live wherever they wanted.
This is a brand new Ford F-250. Have you ever been beaten by a West Spaghetti noodle from your girlfriend because she has a twin sister and accidentally married her dad? Yeah, well that's how it feels like driving Ford F-250. Ford.